Hello and welcome back to another episode of Between Sundays. My name is Pilar Freed, and if you don't know who I am, my husband Jonathan Freed is our pastor of music and worship here at Rainbow, Pastor Jonathan Freed, and with me I have the other Pastor John's wife, Michelle. Michelle, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Michelle, the other Pastor John's wife. We've been here at Rainbow for 4 years, and today we're talking about the replication process of discipleship. So this is the part 2 of Pilar and my podcast for discipleship. If you have not watched part 1 yet, go back and watch that one first and then come back to today's.
Well, if you're still listening, we're going to assume that that's because you did, in fact, join us for part 1. So last time we were here, we talked about, some of the nuances of women's discipleship group. Both you and I have been in a discipleship group for, I guess now 15 months. Mm-hmm. And we're getting ready to, as sad as that is, I'm sad that our discipleship group is coming to an end. But
mixed emotions.
It's this mixed emotions because, we have formed some really solid friendships and relationships, but I'm also excited about the replication process. Yes. But that sounds like a really intimidating thing, or it could sound really intimidating. So we've talked about this since we started meeting as a discipleship group. We're really beginning with the end in mind. Mm-hmm. We did not just join a discipleship group. When you approached us and asked, we knew that we were going to be a part of a group, but that group was also going to replicate. It was going to come to an end, but then we would have this task, this commissioning almost, to make our own discipleship groups, be disciples who make disciples.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to discipleship, a lot of fruit that comes from it, the spiritual growth, number 1, the deep relationships, number 2. But a big part of discipleship is that expectation to replicate, to take what you've learned and invest that into others. And that's where the multiplication process begins.
Absolutely. Well, and for people who have never been in a discipleship group, who don't have any idea of what that looks like, again, and we talked about this in part 1, how a discipleship group is very unique from just a small group or a Sunday school or a Bible study, which are all great things, but they're not discipleship groups.
Correct.
We're not necessarily joining a Bible study to replicate and start another Bible study.
Right.
It's different in that regard. And so what are the first steps? Just, for someone who's thinking about just joining a discipleship group, or maybe you're in a discipleship group right now and you're wondering what is the next step when this actually ends. What are the first steps to even becoming a part of a discipleship group? Where do we even begin?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's often the hardest question.
Yes.
So the very first step, and you're lucky, hopefully this podcast comes out in time, there is a church-wide discipleship training coming up on April 18th here at Rainbow. That would be the number 1 step to take, is sign up for that training so you can find out exactly what this looks like. And Pastors John and Joel are going to be leading that and giving us a great view of the why behind the what. Why do we do discipleship, and why is it important for us to be obedient in that way? And then after you go to discipleship training, you'll have a lot of questions answered. But I also think if you are looking to see if you're ready to get into a discipleship group, or you're looking for women to lead in a discipleship group, there's things that you need to look for. I like to use the acronym that you want to be a FAT disciple. And so FAT for faithful, available, and teachable. Are you being faithful to come on Sundays and to get plugged in and building relationships and serving in the church? And when you're looking for women who are ready, are they being faithful to do those things? And then second, available. Sometimes you have all the excitement and readiness to start a group, but your schedule is just not available at this time. You just simply don't have that in your schedule right now.
Right.
And, there's 2 ways you can go with that. Sometimes it might mean that you need to reassess what's on your plate and think, okay, is everything that I'm saying yes to kingdom focused? Is it high priority? Or is there something that I can take off of my plate so that I can commit to being part of a discipleship group? And then sometimes the season is just not right now.
Right.
We talked in the last podcast about, when we first got here to Virginia, we took 2 years off from doing any kind of discipleship, because we need to get to know the area and the church and build those relationships, but with the idea in mind that as soon as the possibility presents itself, we're ready to do discipleship. And you had a similar situation too with the season. You had to wait for the right season to do discipleship.
Yeah, I mean, I had been a part of, so we've been at Rainbow, I guess, over 8 years now. I had been a part of lots of different groups at Rainbow, Bible studies. I've taught Bible studies. We're a part of a small group, but I had never been part of a discipleship group. And when you guys first got here, of course, you took those 2 years. But when you were first starting to think about a discipleship group, I did come to mind. However, I was getting ready to have my third baby. And I think I would have said no if I was, 27 months pregnant, which is how it felt. Yes, exactly. And so, but after I had my baby, after things started settling down, I was able to say yes. And I do just want to clarify that it's not like I had nothing going on in my life anymore. It's not like my calendar was wide open.
Right.
I still was working, full time from home. I was still being a mom full time. I was still serving, alongside my husband here at church. So it's not like my calendar magically emptied, because spoiler alert, your calendar is never going to magically empty.
Don't tell me that. On to hope.
It's never going to happen. But I did find space because this was a priority. This is something I really wanted to do. I really felt like this was how the Lord I was going to grow spiritually, and relationally. I was very excited to form new, strong friendships with other women who were also serving and were also in similar seasons of life that I was in. So whenever we use the word available, it's not like, oh, yes, I am so available. But so it's not like, again, the calendar was wide open, but I knew this was a priority and I was going to make it a priority, and I was able to do it.
Yeah, that's a great thing to add in. I would agree with that. And then the last part of that FAT acronym is teachable. Some self-assessment. Am I teachable? In a blunt way, you don't want to be a know-it-all. Whether you're leading a group or whether you're a member of a group, you want to be willing to be led by others. Be ready to learn and grow from others, even if they're younger than you or not as far along in their walk as you. Be teachable. Mm-hmm. I know even in leading our group, I tell you guys all the time, sometimes I don't even feel like the leader because I'm learning so much from you guys, and we all bring our own wisdom to the table. We have to be willing to be wrong sometimes, be willing to be challenged sometimes, and be willing to be held accountable sometimes. So when you are thinking, am I ready to be in a discipleship group? Think about how willing are you to be vulnerable to being taught. And when you're looking for those women, find women who want to learn and want to grow.
Sure. Well, and I think you kind of touched on it there. You're not necessarily teaching us. It's not like we come and we sit in our designated table at Starbucks, mm-hmm. and you teach us a lesson. It's much more of a discussion.
Sure.
And so, because it might be intimidating for someone who has never led a group, or they don't feel themselves like they don't think they're a natural leader, or maybe they're not a natural teacher. You don't have to be a natural teacher. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be a teacher to lead and keep other women accountable and disciple others. That's one of the beautiful things about discipleship group is that even though the replication process sounds intimidating, it's in practice, it's really not that intimidating. And ultimately, and we've talked about this before, we're all called to make disciples. Mm-hmm. And, whether you're a teacher or not, whether you're a scholar of the Bible for 20 years or you're a scholar of the Bible for 5 years, you are still called, and you are still, the Holy Spirit will equip you. He will help you as you are leading and facilitating this discipleship group.
And ideally, you're going to be in a group first for 12 to 18 months. And so, again, you're not just sitting and learning and then all of a sudden, boom, you're kicked out of the nest and you've got to fly. You've been taking these steps throughout the whole process of being in a group.
And we've actually started taking those steps in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. The last 3 or 4 months, I think it's always wise to go ahead and start taking turns with facilitating the group. So you kind of get into a groove, you learn how to manage that time well, that hour to 3 hours, well, depending on your discipleship group, you're learning how to lead while you're in the group.
Yeah.
And so whenever the group ends and you're responsible to then find another group, you've already been practicing
Right.
For a long time.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so we have our discipleship group, like I said in part 1, we've been meeting since January of 2025, and that's been every single week. And so it is a weekly commitment. We meet every single Tuesday, and there's been very few that we have skipped.
Less than a handful.
Yes, I would say maybe 5 for the whole year. And now, of course, sickness happens, sick children happen, different things happen. But we've even met virtually a couple of times, just to keep that connection going. But that's part of what the leader does. It's they're facilitating, keeping that accountability, making sure we're still meeting, making sure you're the one asking the harder questions, guiding the discussion. Again, not necessarily, you're not coming in with all of the answers to all of our questions, but if we don't know the answer, we work together and we look for the answer, reading like commentary or different things like that. So again, you're not coming in looking at as a Bible teacher. You're coming in as almost more of a facilitator of those discussions.
I would agree. There's a higher level of weight, I guess, for the leader to make sure that the discipleship group runs the way that it should. There's got to be some structure there so that you make sure that all of the spiritual disciplines are being upheld.
Yeah.
And you're the one modeling that transparency in the beginning to encourage everyone else to be transparent. Modeling that accountability, maybe asking some specific accountability questions to get that transparency going. But as far as teaching, everyone is teaching.
Right.
And I think that is very helpful when you're starting to lead your first group, because you don't, like you said, you don't have to be a natural leader. You don't have to be a natural teacher. You just have to be willing to uphold the spiritual disciplines and model what that discipleship process should look like, so that everyone benefits and everyone grows.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the challenge of a women's group versus a men's group, because sometimes we get off tangents,
It's got to be somebody to bring.
There's got to be somebody to be like, well, coming back to Romans 2, different things, just helping guide the group along so that we are maintaining those, like you call them, spiritual disciplines. We are keeping those at the forefront of our time together. They're taking the priority of our time together. But of course, our Tuesday nights, I mean, we always share what our week is going like, what our week looks like, what struggles we're having. We do ask the hard questions. And I think you said last time we go VBS style with our memory verses, whether that's one Bible verse, whether that's a whole chapter, whether it's a big Bible verse, a small Bible verse. One of the things I've done is I've been memorizing Bible verses along with my son, who's memorizing them for downstairs for catechism. They're still Bible verses, and it's, modeling that. And so I think you kind of touched on this, but again, the beauty is that everyone is learning together. Everyone is teaching each other, and it's okay to say, I don't know. Let's figure this out together.
Right.
So no one should be intimidated by, oh my goodness, now I need to teach a lesson. This is a very, not easy, but it's a very doable replication process.
Well, and when you're in a discipleship group first, you have these, 3 to 5 ladies you've been walking with deeply for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And then when you go to start your own discipleship groups, you already have that network of ladies who are doing it too. And you get to have that built-in resource of women you trust. For our group, when we end, the hope is that we'll still meet maybe monthly at first for a while, as we are all finding other women to be in our next group, so that we can come together and say, hey, how's your new group going?
Yeah.
Have you been praying about so-and-so? Are they interested in joining your group? What are some challenges that you're noticing?
Yeah.
How did you work through those? What are some things that are going great, or new ideas that you've had that have been helpful? So you've got a built-in network of women you already trust who are now following the same model and replicating. You're doing it together.
And sometimes it's hard to know, like, where do I begin finding another person? How do I go about finding women who would want to be a part of a discipleship group? Sure. And I mean, certainly the first place to look would be that training. that's coming up. I forget what the date of that
April
is.
18th.
April 18th. But that's a good place to start. But also, like you said, I now have this network of 3 other women who know lots of other people outside of my worship ministry bubble that I tend to live in. They know other women who are also interested in being a part of discipleship groups, and which is really cool. It's not only a spiritual gift that we have this connection, this relationship that we have formed, but it's also a really valuable resource, like you said.
I agree.
Well,
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think just looking at Jesus's model for discipleship, if you look at Matthew 28, 18 through 20, I believe, where Jesus says, before he leaves the disciples, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son, the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I'm with you always. And so, we talk about those verses a lot for international missions.
Right.
But sometimes we forget that's for local, too. That's for discipling our neighbor, our sister, our coworker, our best friend, or a new woman who's just come to church. We are called to disciple anyone who God brings into our path and calls us to. And so, if those were Jesus' last words on earth before he left his disciples to go replicate, then his last words on earth need to be our first priority.
Yeah.
And so, he even modeled it, his 3 years of ministry, walking with those disciples. He chose 12 men to be with him, and he walked closely alongside them. He taught them scripture. He taught them who he is. He ate with them. He wept with them. And then there were 3 of those disciples that he took even further and showed even deeper transparency with those 3. And so I think Jesus perfectly modeled this discipleship that we are, implementing here at Rainbow now. He modeled it perfectly. And then he charged those disciples and us to do the same. And so I think if this is how Jesus discipled others, then it's certainly the way that we need to be discipling as well.
Absolutely. And I like how you said that we tend to put that Bible verse as it's just international missions. And it certainly does apply to international missions, but we can't negate that responsibility we have here stateside, here in our neighborhoods, here in our church. And that call, like you said, that was one of the final commands that Jesus left. Mm-hmm. Shouldn't that be a big goal that we have for ourselves to make sure we are being discipled, but also to replicate, to be ready to disciple others, to maybe step out of your comfort zone a little bit, to go into a discipleship group that's going to hold you accountable, that's going to answer tough questions, but it's also going to be such a tremendously fruitful and stretching and growing time. I mean, again, like I said before, I've been a part of, Bible studies, small groups, all sorts of different, church groups here at Rainbow and in other churches. And, but there's something very, very unique about the discipleship group model in that it's we've said a couple times, it's much more intimate. And I think I've grown a lot more, just in these last 15 months, at an accelerated rate. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's certainly a life-changing thing. And
yeah,
when you're following Jesus' model, you can't go wrong.
No, that's ultimately what we're doing here,
Yes.
So we do hope you will join us for that discipleship group training on April 18th. I think Pastors John and Joel will be leading that. And I haven't attended one with Pastor Joel yet, but the one that we did, I think it was a year ago, was very good. It was very practical, but it was also helpful in understanding how exactly discipleship is modeled here and what it looks like. So
yeah.
Anything else you would like to add about discipleship before we wrap up?
I think that's about it. I think you should do it.
That's the ultimate.
Just do it.
Just do it. Just go ahead and jump in and do it. It's been really great. So thank you guys so much for joining us for our second installment of women's discipleship groups. And we hope to see you at the training on April 18th.